Have you ever heard history's whisper? Not the loud, ceremonial one that booms from podiums, but the quiet, barely audible one. The slide of a bolt in -40-degree cold, the knock of knuckles against freezing metal, a short order on which lives depended. Sometimes this whisper materializes into objects. Here it is, lying before me on a velvet cushion in a museum. Well, a photo of it, because holding this treasure is a madman's dream. The Baltiets. Just one word. And behind it, the tragedy of an entire city, the ambitions of designers, the fear of authority, and only 14 units. 14 ghosts, scattered by fate across the world. What was it? A weapon of desperation or a weapon of hope? A genius development or an act of disobedience? To understand, we need to transport ourselves into the very furnace. Not just into the war, into hell. Leningrad, the winter of 1942.
Immagine.
A city in a ring. Cold that isn't just uncomfortable, it's murderous.
-30, -40.
Metal turns vicious, like a wild beast. Lubricant freezes. Mechanisms fine-tuned in warm workshops fail. And at the front, on the icy bridgeheads of the Nevsky Pyatachok on Ladoga, a commander drawing his standard TT pistol, Tula Tokarev, at a critical moment hears not a shot but a dull click. A misfire, a malfunction, and that click might be the last thing he ever hears. The TT is an excellent pistol for normal conditions. Powerful with a flat trajectory. But its firing mechanism was finicky with dirt and, as it turned out, with fierce frost. This wasn't just a technical glitch. It was a gap in the defense paid for in blood. And then he appears, Yuri Fedorovich Rall, Chief of Staff of the Baltic Fleet. A man who could not accept this state of affairs. The fleet, especially the Marines, operated in conditions even more extreme than the ground forces. Dampness, ice, wind from the Gulf of Finland. Rall, having gone through a harsh school, understood. A weapon was needed that would work always. He doesn't just go through channels. He goes to the Leningrad City Party Committee, the Obkom. The body that, in the besieged city, possessed incredible, almost divine power. His proposal: urgently create a self-loading pistol for the command staff of the fleet and army, one not afraid of the cold. The request was heard. Power in Leningrad then was, first and foremost, Andrei Zhdanov, a tough, pragmatic man, but one who understood the necessity of initiative in a critical situation. The task is given to plant number 181. Also, Istil, evacuated to Leningrad. The task sounded almost like an order: do the impossible. In a city where workers were collapsing from hunger at their machines, under constant shelling and bombing, create a new type of weapon from scratch. Not copy, but create. And onto the stage come our main heroes, the designers. Their names should be known to everyone interested in weapons history. Pavel Nikitic Bogdanov and Sergei Alexandrovich Yegorov. What resources did they have? Hungry rations, cold workshops, and for tools, mainly their own brains, experience, and a captured German pistol, the Walther P-38. Why the Walther? The Germans, preparing for war in the East, had considered our climate. The P-38 was more adapted to harsh conditions. But simply copying it wasn't an option. It needed the Soviet cartridge, that very powerful 7.62 mm cartridge from the TT. The task was an engineering crossword puzzle: to dress the brains and reliability of the Walther onto the powerful Soviet body. And they did it. They worked tirelessly. This wasn't just labor. It was an act of resistance. Every machined part, every blueprint was a shot at the enemy. And in the spring of 1942, when the ice melted on the Neva, but the siege still gripped the city in a steel hoop, the first prototype saw the light of day. They called it the Baltiets, in honor of the fleet that had commissioned it. The very first tests shocked everyone. At the testing range, in 30-degree frost, when metal tears skin from fingers, the Baltiets fired. Not a single malfunction. It worked precisely like a Swiss watch. It was a victory of engineering over the elements. But a nuance emerged. The pistol was a bit heavy and slightly large for comfortable shooting. The designers, without much thought, went for a revision. They shortened the barrel, lightened the construction. The final weight, about 950 grams, less than a kilogram. Combat qualities didn't suffer. They had created the perfect tool for war in a Russian winter. And here begins the most dramatic turn of this story. Imagine the emotions of Bogdanov and Yegorov. They had performed a miracle. They had given the army and navy something that could save the lives of thousands of commanders. They expect an order for series production, praise, maybe even awards. But instead, silence. And then icy horror. The mistake that shouldn't have been. In the heat of work, under the emergency conditions of the blockaded city, the designers and plant management made a fatal miscalculation. They did not coordinate the design and launch into production with Moscow, with the People's Commissariat of Armaments, with Stalin in the end. They acted according to the logic of a besieged fortress. We decide here. But they forgot they lived in the Soviet Union, where the chain of command was sacred, and any bottom-up initiative not sanctioned from above was viewed as an attack on the foundations of the state, as separatism. The first batch was supposed to be 15 units. They made 14. Some parts went missing. In starving Leningrad, this could be interpreted not as theft, but as sabotage. The guilty were found and punished. But that was just the first sign. What became of these 14 pistols? They were distributed among the highest leadership. It was a unique elite item. 2 pistols were gifted to the Leningrad Obkom, to Zhdanov himself and his circle. A few more went to the Baltic fleet, to Admirals Tribets and Smirnov. One, finished with particular flair, was presented as a gift to the all-powerful People's Commissar of the USSR Navy, Nikolai Gerasimovich Kuznetsov. Seemingly, recognition. But no, the Baltiets became not a weapon, but evidence. After the war, in the late 40s, the infamous Leningrad affair unfolded. Stalin, suspecting the Leningrad elite of wanting to create some sort of Russian center opposed to Moscow, brought down repression upon them. And among the numerous, often delusional accusations, the pistol episode surfaced. Like the illegal, unauthorized production of weapons in Leningrad, what was that? Preparation for an armed revolt? Creation of secret arsenals for the opposition. Absurd? For us, yes. For that time, a deadly serious accusation. The Baltiets transformed from a symbol of heroic labor into a symbol of Leningrad separatism. And it was immediately buried. There could be no talk of series production. The very idea was anathematized. And what do you think? Here's a question that haunts me. Could Bogdanov and Yegorov, had they been more cautious and diplomatic, have pushed through their pistol? Or was the system doomed to destroy any project born not by its decree? Would the Soviet leadership have helped here? History gives a clear answer: no. Under a totalitarian system, where control was paramount, not efficiency, a genius but non-regulation development was doomed. The leadership would have helped only in one case, if the initiative had been formalized as its own. Otherwise, the Baltiets fell victim not to technical flaws, but to political games. Analysis and background. From an economic standpoint, launching the Baltiets into series in the midst of war would have been extremely difficult. Factories were overloaded producing proven, already established weapons, PPSH, TT Mosin rifles. Retooling assembly lines for a new, albeit better, pistol meant losing pace. But it's not even about that. In peacetime, in the 50s, the Makarov pistol PM was adopted. It also used the Walther design, but for a less powerful cartridge. It was smaller, lighter, more comfortable for daily carry. But was it as reliable in extreme cold as the Baltiets? A big question. The Baltiets was ahead of its time. It was a weapon for the apocalypse, which the Leningrad siege was. When the apocalypse ended, the need for such a specialized tool disappeared. What became of the pistols? Here's the main intrigue. Most of the 14 specimens vanished without a trace. Perhaps they were destroyed as material evidence in the Leningrad affair. Perhaps they are stored in the special archives of the FSB or the Ministry of Defense. One or two, experts believe, could have been preserved in the families of those very admirals. Kuznetsov's pistol might be in the Central Naval Museum. But these are just guesses. They are like ghosts, the material embodiment of the courage, intellect, and fear of one of the most tragic periods of our history. Every time I look at its photo, angular, severe, without unnecessary frills, I don't see just a pistol. I see the Leningrad winter. I see the designer's hands, swollen from hunger, but firmly holding a blueprint. I see the fear of denunciation and the bright hope that their creation would save someone's life. This isn't a rare Soviet pistol. This is a monument to the human spirit, capable of working miracles under the most inhuman conditions, and a monument to the system that ruthlessly broke that spirit. And finally, the main question for you: what if the Baltiets had gone into series? Would it have changed anything? Would it have become a legend like the PPSH? Or would it have faded into oblivion like many experimental models? Write in the comments what you think. Your opinion is priceless. And of course, subscribe to the channel. There are many more such stories ahead, where behind one small object lies a whole universe of drama, feat, and secrets. Hit the like if this story gripped you as much as it did me. Until next time in the past.